Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to The Crew 2.
I'm Great Joe, and that's a lot of blue.
Well, this is the new feature of the DLC that just dropped. So I figure, hey, let's have a look. This is the live summit.
Okay.
Polar Rush is this week's event, followed by Rising Sun Off the Beaten Path, and then Live Extreme Mixtape. These are the events we will need to complete for points, and you can see on the left there how many points you need to reach the different ranks. Specifically 400,000 to reach the top 3,000 players, because that is how this works. You need to be one of the top racers in order to get all of the rewards.
3, 2, 1.
So we have actually seen this street race before.
Okay.
But I am going to have to take it completely seriously this time instead of just messing around on a motorcycle.
Oh, right, that was right.
Because I am not competing against those guys I just left behind. I am competing against other live players and how fast they manage to get on this race. Also, this was the same day I recorded the last video, so I still haven't turned off the navigation ribbon.
Reminded of Forza series and how that one had like drivatars.
Drivatars?
Yeah, driver avatars. It's basically a little robot in the game would learn how you drive and then make a little robot version of you that would drive against other players in their games.
Huh.
Yeah. It's a very interesting way to make multiplayer asynchronous.
I suppose. But yes, in this case it is a multiplayer score attack. Because the 3,000 highest scores walk away with the grand prize, and all the lesser prizes below it. Well, I believe it was the top 8,000 get the second tier prize, the top 15,000 get the third tier prize. And incidentally, this is the giant cow race, so you've got another chance to see it.
Man, I love that thing. What even is there to say about a giant cow? It's quintessential Americana.
There it is. Welcome and enjoy the view. You know, I've actually been up to Lake Superior recently in the winter. The view is a lot more amazing than it is in this game.
Yeah.
But it does get this rocky. Coming up on the end now. As you may recall, it is pretty much just underneath those highway bridges.
Oh yeah.
Yep, top 3. Not important. What is important is that I got fast enough to get over 100,000 points.
Oh. Done did it.
Yeah. 100,000 means you're doing pretty good. And now we're going off on a rally raid. You might have also noticed that certain of the races have restrictions on the kind of vehicle you can take out for them. I'll get more into that once we actually do a race which has a restriction. As it is, this one does not.
Stay focused on the route and you'll ace
a nomad.
Yep. So this, incidentally, is a brand new race. I've never been on this course before. I think it dropped with the update.
Oh. This is also a very good example of why I don't want a nomad.
Oh?
Hey, central heating?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like being able to feel my toes. It's a great thing to have while you're driving.
Yeah. Well, luckily my toes aren't in any position of worry when I'm driving a virtual nomad.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, this is a pretty interesting course. A lot of canyon driving here.
Yeah. And it definitely feels about as confusing as a real live rally raid, I'd imagine, or at least gives you a taste.
Yeah, you might notice that this particular event does not have a navigation ribbon. I believe you can turn them on and off, like, based on which event you're looking at, but obviously for some of them you just don't need one. Like the monster truck, there's really no navigation needed for that. Although I suppose I could turn it on for the actual race in the monster trucks.
Oh boy. Oh! There you go.
Yeah. And even though losing control is kind of part of the game when you're in a rally raid, the snow is definitely not helping things.
Yeah. I just can't imagine anything under there giving a lot more traction.
Well, still, it does seem looser than it normally would be. But of course, this is all part of the event. It's the theme, Polar Rush.
Yeah.
Hey, Bison.
Hey. Oh.
Well, I got turned around, but hey, look at that, a shortcut.
Wow. How convenient.
Yes. I'm not sure I would have seen that if I were going, the direction I was pointed.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Just nip that bison in the leg.
Alright. Not quite as good as the street race. But incidentally, something nice about doing events for the Live Summit is that you still get your rewards. You still get your parts, your money, and your followers. Oh hey, the air race demands that I have a P-51 Mustang. Whatever shall I do? I don't know how to fly this plane.
2, 1.
I gotta wonder how you'll manage.
You're gonna ace this. I know it.
Oh, I'm sure I'll think of something. But yes, This is the New York air race. It's something we could have seen in the last video, but I chose not to do it, so now we're seeing it today.
Here we are.
And of course, there's really not much that, you know, a bunch of snow can really do for a air race. Well,
there's the constant reminder that you're looking through a camera with a lens.
Yeah, there's that. They did make sure that the weather was terrible, and that does do something to visibility here. And I am not acing this quite as much as I wanted to. I'm still doing pretty good. Among other things, the P-51 is a very fast vehicle. Once you get it upgraded enough, of course. There goes the objective the other way.
Oh. And there goes
Statue of Liberty?
Liberty Island.
Yep. Beat it by 45 seconds.
So, is it just winter everywhere now?
I'm not quite sure if it's winter everywhere in like the free roaming environment, but all of these events take place with a lot of snow. Now these three up there, they're kind of special. They are like events that you can find in free roaming. And they're just like little minor things that you can do while you're out and about. In this case, the goal is to beat the timer, number one, and number two, line up for the center of those little circles at precisely the right angle. If you can do that, you get 1,200 points. Or you could just miss a gate entirely. Or you can get the angle just right, but not get the center of the circle, and that won't get you full points either. But hey, 2,000 bonus if you reach the end of it. And that gets me most of the way to 100,000 points.
Nice.
And it is worth noting that the Live Summit only keeps track of your best run. So you can repeat these as much as you like to try and get better score. I'm going to need an off-road vehicle for this one. Just a hunch. And maybe it would be better to have the best performance parts in it. There we go. Alright, so here's the way this one works. You drive away.
Oh.
Yeah, there is a slowly expanding circle that is slowly speeding up as it expands. And if that circle reaches you, then the game is over. Ah, damn it. I almost got through.
Almost.
On the bright side, I did beat the minimum score you needed. But I could have done a lot better, or at least that's what Live Summit thinks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oof.
A lot better. Let's try this again. while you're in Live Summit, as soon as you finish one of these events that are normally free roaming, you automatically jump back to the main Live Summit menu.
Seems to make the retrays easier. At least, right?
Good enough. Let's keep going.
Alright.
And I beat Tuck. Yay!
Yay!
Screw that guy. And for beating Tuck, I got over 37,000 points.
Okay.
Apparently they have much higher expectations for me. But I should move on to another event.
Weird.
Speed Trap. So for Speed Trap, I'm gonna need a
Yeah, this was
fast car.
This was at the original, yeah.
And I see that I am not the only person trying for the Speed Trap here. Which I missed.
Oh.
I think Ludo there missed too.
I think Ludo has a questionable taste.
Well, I'm in a Koenigsegg.
Yeah.
Figured that'd be a good way to get a good high speed. And I certainly beat the hell out of the minimum score. That only got me about half the points, and I know I can go faster.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give myself a longer head start here. Whoops. Okay, let's see what we can do with this much space. Whoops. Okay, let's see what we can do with this much space.
Okay. You can do it. I believe in you.
Well, at least I beat my old score.
Yeah. And that's half.
Got me over 50,000, yeah. Alright, back to the summit. So that's the 3 events done. Huh. So, this is the power boat, but it requires me to use the proto brand. So, well, obviously I'm gonna have to pick the Mark II. That just makes sense.
3,
Yeah. It's one better.
Of course, this is one of the more awkward powerboat races.
Listen to the engine. It's saying, let's win.
And by that I mean it's one of the ones that goes into the ocean waters.
Oh.
You can see them peeking over there. Because, yeah, we're not just going into the ocean waters, we're going into the ocean waters during bad weather.
Well, fits the winter theme at least.
Yeah. Already getting some chop, and we haven't left the coastline yet.
This is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, we're going into the ocean around that cruise ship up there.
Ooh.
So, here we go.
I'm expecting sick jumps. Whoa. Start. Yeah, they just keep on going.
Yeah. The other boats did catch up with me, though. Honestly, I'm not sure how they managed to maintain their composure in those heavy waves. As it is, I did pretty good.
Yeah.
Alright. Well, I guess I have to do this one eventually.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure you'll do fine.
Well, at least all the snow on the ground will help me drift.
Concentrate and let the car become an extension of yourself.
Well, at least Latrell is being supportive.
Yeah. Honestly, half the stuff they say for drift races, it feels like they're mocking me.
I mean, that's what all of those car douches that gather around drift competitions say. I mean...
No, I mean that they sound supportive, but it comes off as mocking because it assumes a skill level I do not display. But hey, at least I'm doing pretty well. I'm actually getting close to the objective before I turned all the way around like that.
Yeah.
So hey, I'm gonna
At least he spun out.
make bank off of this.
Oh, you're doing fine.
Yeah, and the top score of all time is 700,000.
I gotta wonder if some part of this track just has just enough space for a donut. Like a large, infinite donut.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but I will tell you, I go back to this one after this because I am dissatisfied with the amount of points I got.
Yeah.
I don't just mean the 34,000 here, I mean the amount of summit points I got.
Oh.
Because they were expecting some great things and I was just not delivering. I do manage to improve that. I do manage to get over 100,000 on that track. But that's after a lot of practice. Alright, and this is a Formula 1 Alpha Grand Prix event. Restriction is Red Bull car only.
Okay. Why are they letting you out on slicks?
Go, go!
It's a special Grand Prix event. Mixed vehicles. Manhattan. And apparently trying to drive on snow using racing slicks.
Yeah.
Honestly, it goes a whole lot better than it has any right to.
Yeah. What are the reasons why, like... Okay, so I used to watch Formula 1 around the mid-noughties when it was the most boring. I would hold off on it unless it was raining or looked likely to rain because... Not because it would... Well, for one, it made crashes a lot more likely, which is really why, well, I would watch it. but also because everybody would have to pit just to change into rain tires, and I can't imagine those slicks doing anything in snow.
Yeah. I remember hearing that for a while. Rain tires in Grand Prix were just normal tires, but somebody took a knife and cut some grooves in them by hand.
Nice.
Handmade treads.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that's basically what you have to do if you want the Grand Prix open wheel car to jump. You gotta put a ramp in front of it, because there's no sort of road that is going to make that happen otherwise.
Well, like, it's been true for a while that those things generate enough downforce at speed to drive upside down.
Yeah. Although if you get a lot of things going fast enough, they can go upside down.
Yeah.
Like, you can skate a loop-de-loop. Alright. Not 100,000, but pretty good. Pretty good. And for completing all of the events, I get a bonus 100,000, and my rank is now 730,000 points, and 975th in the world. So, fairly comfortable position within the top 3,000.
Hey.
But of course that's going to change. This is the first day of this event.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sure it'll go fine.
For today's movie, patron Lord Zed Repulsa asked me to take a look at the 2001 movie Rat Race. It's an American ensemble piece and a madcap comedy road race, so be warned right now, hijinks will ensue. The story about the story. Right, no Hollywood background to give you this time, so let's get right to the movie. Rat Race was originally an idea created by Daryl Quarles, and his initial spec script was picked up by producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who was working with the studio Hollywood Pictures at the time. Filming rights traded hands a few times, and the film would eventually be produced and directed by Jerry Zucker, and released by Paramount Pictures. Zucker has a solid background in comedy. He wrote and directed the spoof film Airplane in 1980, and he wrote and produced The Naked Gun in 1988. In this case, though, the screenwriter who created the final script for Rat Race was Andy Breckman, a man who wrote for Saturday Night Live and David Letterman, and whose biggest hit would probably be the TV mystery show Monk. The cast, as mentioned, is an ensemble, so there are a lot of recognizable names that split a lot of the screen time between them. You've got John Cleese of Monty Python fame as the eccentric billionaire who kicks off the plot of the film, Rowan Atkinson of Mr. Bean fame as an Italian tourist, Cuba Gooding Jr. as a football referee, Seth Green back for another film, this time as a scam artist, John Lovitz of SNL as an American tourist, Whoopi Goldberg, Breckin Meyer, Wayne Knight from Seinfeld, and even more. The film's critical reception was mixed. Rat Race tends to focus on individual gags rather than story or character development, and that's the kind of movie Jerry Zucker tends to create. Sadly, this one isn't as good as his earlier works, but I wouldn't call it a waste of 2 hours, and the film would make a decent profit of $85.5 million on a $48 million budget. So let me just describe the order the gags come in by explaining the story. After some animated credits, the movie starts in a Las Vegas hotel casino, the Venetian. We see Owen Templeton drinking his sorrows away. He was a referee who called heads when the coin landed tails for a football overtime kickoff. And in case you were wondering, the coin toss decides who receives the ball first, and Owen made a fool of himself by sticking to his call even though everyone could see that he was wrong. At this point, even people who don't care about football are recognizing him. Dwayne and Blaine Cody are a pair of con artist brothers who plan on faking an injury to extort money from the hotel. Dwayne will be doing most of the talking, both now and in the future, because Blaine recently got a tongue piercing and it's become infected. They don't get away with it though, because some poor old woman slips on the shot glass that they were going to use. Vera Baker is a mother who just found her long-lost daughter Meryl Jennings. Meryl owns a successful cosmetics company, but is very stressed out by her business, while Vera is a laid-back woman who only contacted Meryl because her psychic said she needed her. Randy Pear, his wife Beverly, and his kids Jason and Kimberly are a family that just got to Vegas after a long road trip. Randy is too cheap to tip the bellboy, but he's not too cheap to go to the casino behind his wife's back with a big wad of cash. Nick Schaefer is a young but ambitious lawyer who wants to keep his nose clean so that he can run for office one day. However, his friend Richie is holding a bachelor party and wants Nick to have some fun and break some rules. Nick reluctantly decides to at least spin one of the slot machines, and then he and everybody else I mentioned get a special golden token that tells them to go to guest services. They all go up to the penthouse for a special reception where they're joined by the last winner, a flamboyant and narcoleptic Italian tourist named Enrico Polini. Once he arrives, their host introduces himself as Donald Sinclair, the owner of the hotel, and he explains the premise. 563 miles away is a place called Silver City, New Mexico. Sinclair has placed $2 million in a luggage locker in the town's train station, and he gives one key for the locker to each contestant. Whoever gets to the money first gets to keep it. No other rules. He tells them he's doing this because he's rich and eccentric, but really he's doing this so his wealthy patrons will have something new to bet on. At first, most of the group think it's some kind of trick or trap, Meryl and Nick in particular. But when Randy Pear makes a break for it, everyone but Nick starts running after him. When they all catch up, Owen suggests working together and splitting the money, but when Enrico makes it clear that he's in it for himself, the rest decide to split up too. Most of them head straight for the door and a cab, but Randy ends up taking his family along even though he tried to lie to them so that he could go alone. Most of the teams head for the airport, with Meryl chartering a private plane for a direct flight, and most of the rest buying a ticket to Albuquerque, New Mexico. For his part, Nick is still not interested, and instead tries to hit on a pilot named Tracy Fawcett, who is reading a book in the airport bar. Dwayne and Blaine get to the airport too late to get a ticket, so instead they sabotage the airport radar and ground all the planes. They destroy their Ford Bronco in the process, though, and so they have to get a rental Cadillac Fleetwood Eldorado as the other teams find their own cars. Then, Nick finds out that Tracy is flying a helicopter to Roswell, New Mexico, and helicopters aren't grounded, so he decides to ask her for a ride. Owen tries to take a taxi to Silver City, but it turns out the cab driver lost 20 grand on the football game he flubbed, and instead drives him out to the middle of the desert, takes his shoes and pants, and leaves him there. Randy tries to drive straight to Silver City, but his family is going nuts from being stuck in the Ford Aerostar minivan and convince him to stop at the Barbie Museum. But it turns out to be about Klaus Barbie, a hero of the Nazi movement. For reference, John Lovitz and his character Randy are both Jewish. Dwayne and Blaine happen to spot Randy's van and sabotage it while the family's inside, so Randy steals Hitler's touring car to stay in the race. Fun fact, the car they steal is a 1935 Lincoln K, which has been modified to look like a Mercedes-Benz 770K. The 770K was in fact the kind of car that Hitler would ride during parades. Tracy takes a detour to buzz her boyfriend's place, but she catches him in the pool with a woman he said was his ex-girlfriend. She starts throwing stuff at his Dodge Ram and chases him into the desert, but then she burns out her engine and makes an emergency landing. After that, she hijacks the Ram truck, and Nick, swept up in the moment, goes with her. Meanwhile, Owen makes it out of the desert to a highway rest stop. The first thing he does is go for the water fountain, but the second thing he does is trick a bus driver out of his clothes so that he can drive the bus to Santa Fe, New Mexico. The bus is full of Lucille Ball impersonators. Okay. Enrico gets a late start thanks to his narcolepsy, but when he runs out into the street, he gets run over by a man named Zach in a medical supply van. Zach gives Enrico a ride to Silver City in exchange for not reporting him. As for Dwayne and Blaine, they get a copy of their key made so that they can split up and make individual attempts. However, they discuss their plan in front of the hardware store clerk, so the clerk steals their key and the two chase after him. As for Vera and Meryl, they meet a spiteful squirrel lady who gives them bad directions when they refuse to buy a squirrel. Zach tells Enrico about the heart he's transporting, but when they take it out of the cooler for a look, it falls on the floor. Nick and Tracy siphon gas from a sleeping cop's car, and then the clerk steals a hot air balloon because that's clearly a more efficient way to get to Silver City than by truck. Antics ensue involving cows, ropes, and water holes, but in the end, the brothers get their key back. The cow, now attached to the hot air balloon, then crosses Owen's path and causes him to swerve and lose a tire. The Lucys try to help, but they end up tipping the bus over instead. Owen then tells them what he did in a moment of frustration, and so the Lucys start chasing him down the highway. Back with Randy, a series of unlikely events cause him to piss off a female biker gang and then crash into a World War II veterans gathering with a Hitler mustache and speaking nonsense German. As for Zach and Enrico, the heart flies out of the car and then gets chewed on by a dog. So Zach considers replacing it with a fresh heart from Enrico's chest. But Enrico escapes by jumping onto a passing high-speed train and somehow does not get smashed to a pulp in the process. It's Vera and Meryl's turn to wander through the desert after their car got trashed thanks to the squirrel lady, and they happen across a gathering on a desert plain. The people are out there to try and beat the land speed record, so the two ladies steal their rocket car and blast off. They only get so far before it runs out of fuel though, and they're so frazzled by the ride that they get packed onto a bus with patients from a mental institution. Randy's family is recovering from recent events at a roadside diner, and Randy finally tells them about the race and the $2 million. However, none of them are interested in the prize, so he drugs them with cold medication. Unfortunately, the Nazis show up after they fall asleep, so Randy and his family hitch a ride with a trucker and a Freightliner. All the teams are getting close to Silver City now. Owen managed to lose the Lucys in a deleted scene, in which a bus full of Ricky Ricardo impersonators show up. Apparently, that was too unlikely even for this movie. Either way, he has no car anymore, so instead he hops on a horse. Dwayne and Blaine get distracted by a couple of pretty ladies on the road, so they end up crashing into a monster truck race, and line up with a bunch of cars meant for crushing. Hey, what do you know? Monster trucks did come up in one of the movies. Anyway, the Cadillac gets crushed, so the brothers steal one of the trucks, specifically a modded Ford F-350 Wildfire. The teams meet at the edge of Silver City, and with all their vehicles busted or unable to drive further, they all get out and start running for the train station. Enrico gets inside the station first since he came by train, but his narcolepsy strikes again, and the others catch up and start wrestling to put their key in first. Dwayne wins, but then the locker turns out to be empty. Now Sinclair didn't lie about the money. Instead, Sinclair's lawyer was at the station to witness the winner, and he brought along a prostitute named Vicky, and Vicky stole the money and convinced the lawyer to come with her. They're about to get away, but then the cow, the clerk, and the hot air balloon from earlier land on them. The clerk ties the duffel bag of money to the balloon, but then it floats off without him. As for the contestants, they all steal the tour bus and chase after it. The chase ends with a balloon and the bus crashing into a stage in the middle of the desert. They finally reach the duffel bag and pull out some of the money, but then the lights go up. Turns out it's a Smash Mouth concert, benefiting a charity called Feed the Earth. The crowd thinks the money is a donation and go wild, and the contestants eventually accept this outcome. Then Sinclair and his wealthy guests arrive to see what's been going on, so Nick gets back at them by saying that they'll match every dollar the people at home raised that evening. That's not really something you can back away from when you're at a benefit concert, and a few million isn't really that much for them to pay. So it's a happy ending for starving children across the world as Smash Mouth plays All-Star and the credits roll. The cars. Today's car topic came up in the movie, at least a little bit, and it's also come up in every single video of the crew too. I'm talking about car modding, automobile tuning, vehicle alteration of every kind. It's a broad category, and as you might expect, its history goes right back to the beginning. Back during those first few years of commercial automobiles, there was no such thing as a stock car. There was no real manufacturing process. Car companies would make each vehicle by hand and modify what would come on the car based on how much a customer paid and what options they asked for. You might call this manufacturer modification, and companies would eventually formalize these mods as trim levels. So while a Toyota L model comes with the barest of necessities, a Toyota XLE model will have things like leather seats, a navigation system, tons of speakers by some name-brand audio company, a bigger engine, and so on. But I'll be putting all of that aside to focus more on aftermarket modifications. Now, even just focusing on aftermarket mods, vehicle modding goes right back to the beginning. Internal combustion engines were very unreliable at first, and even the starter systems were hard to use. These days, you only have to turn a key or press a button, but back when cars were new, you had to start the engine with a crank, and if it backfired, you could break your thumb. Engines and car parts would continue to be unreliable up through most of the 20th century, and as a result, car owners had to know a lot more about automobiles than the average owner does today. I've mentioned hot rods before, but the idea of tuning your car for extra speed, power, or endurance really got going during the 1920s, thanks to Prohibition. Rum runners would tune their cars to escape the police, and the police would tune their cars to catch the rum runners. Alcohol smuggling would largely end in 1933 when Prohibition was repealed, but the criminal organizations built by smuggling would continue for some time, and so would the interest in modifying cars. The real golden age of modding, at least in the United States, would last from the end of World War II to the beginning of the 1970s, which is when the government passed some serious air pollution and fuel efficiency laws. America in the post-war period was making all kinds of money by being the only major power not decimated by war. And between that, the GI Bill, and new social programs, everyone was sharing the wealth. Everyone white, anyway. On top of that, all the white folks in America were moving out to the suburbs, and suddenly you needed a car to get around. So everybody had a car, and large numbers of owners had the knowledge and the inclination to tune their rides for fun. There are two major categories for car tuning: performance and appearance. Now, of course, there is some overlap thanks to factors like weight and aerodynamics, and you can also modify things like comfort features and onboard technology. But you can still break most mods down into performance or appearance. Performance modding involves adding or replacing a mechanical part to improve or change how a vehicle behaves. You can do small things like swap in a better air filter, replace the engine oil, or replace body panels and doors with lightweight carbon fiber. Carbon fiber can be as strong as steel at a fraction of the weight, but in exchange it's more brittle and much more expensive. You could also do big things like add a turbo or supercharger, replace the exhaust system so that it can remove more air from the engine per second, or even replace the engine entirely. You'll need to be an expert mechanic to pull off that last job though, since you need to replace pretty much everything else under the hood to do it. However, something easier that you can swap out is the ECU, the Electronic Control Unit. This is the heart of the onboard computer used by modern vehicles. It measures out every fuel-air mixture for every cylinder cycle. It tells the power steering and power brakes how hard they should work. And if the car has an adaptive or adjustable suspension, it tells that suspension how rough or how easy to make the ride. The ECU is why modern vehicles stop working when they get hit by an electromagnetic pulse. The ECUs that come from the factory usually emphasize efficiency to meet government regulations, but you can buy your own ECU, reprogram it to emphasize performance, and see a vast improvement without having to replace a single mechanical part. A lot of production cars actually have this function built in. If you ever find a vehicle that has a sport or an eco mode button, that's shifting what the ECU tells the engine to do. Now, mind you, if you do add new parts, you will need a new ECU that can take advantage of the changes you made. Then you have appearance mods. You can change the color of your car by giving it a new paint job, or you can add decals and vinyl wraps to add patterns, names, logos, and pretty much anything else you want. The car body is your canvas. You've seen plenty of examples in the game, and thanks to modern vinyl printing and paints, just about all of them could potentially exist in real life. You can also modify the interior with colored LEDs, and some people will strap LEDs or fiber optic lights to the undercarriage to give their cars a glowing shadow. You can weld or bolt metal bits to a car's exterior. Adding a wing to the back is fairly practical, but you could also make your car a self-propelled sculpture. You can replace the wheels with colored stylized rims, and if you use carbon fiber rims, you'll also cut down on the weight. You can add a bigger stereo system with huge speakers that fill up the trunk. You can change the way the doors open. You can add hydraulics to the suspension to make the car hop, or you could tint the windows. The list of ideas goes on and on. Thanks for joining me again for today's movie and car review, and I hope I'll see you next time for the classic horror movie where the car is the villain.